everyone. Welcome to Fantasy Football in the Six podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Bandu, and with me is our main guy, Johnny Shermer, with us today. And we're going to go over week 11, what kind of happened, and, who we said to start and sit for that week. And then we'll be going into some of the injuries that have happened over the weekend. And then we'll be going into the week 12 starters and bench players. Johnny, how was your weekend?
It wasn't too bad, I had starts this week, and I think what you said last week, it's definitely a lot tougher, and I see that now. I did very horribly. I think I got one or two good guesses there, and that was about it. But I'll start off with my quarterback. First off, Tua Tagovailoa. That was terrible. I started him in two of my leagues thinking, they're going against the Broncos. The Broncos aren't great. Tua's undefeated. He's going to do well. Guy throws for 83 yards, one touchdown at least, but that was literally it. He got benched in the fourth for Fitzmagic, ended up scoring only 5.7 points, and that is not what you want to see when you start a quarterback.
Yeah, that was a big yikes. Definitely to see Tua struggle against the Denver Broncos. It was definitely a game that I was trying to watch for a bit, but then I kind of had to switch it over and pick a different game to watch just because it was getting pretty bad to see Tua struggle. And then with Fitzmagic coming in to replace him there in the fourth, it was very tough outing. And they were starting to come back to life offensively once Fitzmagic was in the game. So it's kind of interesting to see how things will play out moving forward. Even though Brian Flores has said that Tua is their starter, it's kind of worrisome for fantasy owners if Tua is on a short leash again for their upcoming game. But how was your next guy that you had there?
Yeah, next guy was Big Ben, and I'm glad he did well. It was an easy matchup, or I'd like to say easier matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Steelers moved to 10-0 now. Not Miss Fitzmagic. I'm thinking about him too much right now. Big Ben, he went 267 yards, two touchdowns, did throw an interception, but that's okay. 32 passing completions from 46 attempts. Ended up scoring 19.4 points, so that's pretty average for Big Ben. But I'm glad to see that he did well against those Jaguars.
Yeah, he had a very good game against the Jaguars because usually he doesn't play too well against them, but he really put the team offensively together and was able to find the end zone those two times. Very good game for Ben Roethlisberger. For my guys that I was saying to sit for week 11, Jared Goff, that game is to be determined. Recording this on the Monday before the game, we'll have to see how things play out from. Hopefully, um, you know, things work out in my favor there for the sit. But the other guy I had for sit was Baker Mayfield versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Baker Mayfield was 12 for 22. He had 204 yards. He was sacked three times and he had six carries for 9 yards, one fumble. He scored a total of 4.2 fantasy points. Was definitely not a good game for Baker Mayfield at all. Like I said from last week's podcast episode, Baker has just struggled ever since OBJ had went down. So this game plan for the Browns moving forward is definitely running the ball. You saw Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt do that against the Eagles. So did you happen to see that game, Johnny?
I did, yeah, and it's like you said, why not use the run game when you have a healthy Nick Chubb back, and same with Kareem Hunt. We're gonna talk about Jarvis Landry a little later, but yeah, like you said, why would Baker throw the ball as much as he needs to when you have those two running backs right behind you?
Yeah, Kareem Hunt is a beast himself. I know on that touchdown carry, you sent me the video where he jumped over the guy and scored in the end zone. That was pretty good. When you have those kinds of athletes on your team, you might as well use them.
Yeah, exactly. I'll move on to my wide receivers that I said to start. Two more decent, well, one decent one and one not so good. We'll start off with the decent Emmanuel Sanders against the Atlanta Falcons. Sanders did have a nice, like, I don't know, 45, 50-yard grab that went into the end zone, but it got called back because of an offside, I believe. So that definitely helped. He probably would have got closer to 18, 19 points, but he had four receptions, 66 yards. He was targeted a little more than he was last week, five times today. He did have a fumble. Thankfully, he was already down, so it did stay. But that was okay. He could have definitely done better though.
Yeah, that game was surprising to see. With Taysom Hill in at quarterback, it was kind of interesting to see how he was able to work with the Saints offense there and throwing the ball around to guys like Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. Surprisingly, not so much to Alvin Kamara that game. A big difference there between Drew Brees and Taysom Hill, but that was a phenomenal throw by Taysom Hill to Emmanuel Sanders down the field. And then when Emmanuel Sanders like kind of got up and tried to start running and fumbled, I was
Yeah.
it's kind of like, what is going on here? Like, holy.
Yeah, it's definitely wild. It's like you said, it's a big, big difference when it comes to Taysom Hill at QB rather than Drew Brees. When Drew Brees was in there, we didn't really see him throw to Michael Thomas too much. Then yesterday, you really saw Hill use obviously Thomas as his number one receiver, as he should be. But then, like you said with Kamara, he didn't even have one reception. I think I was saying earlier before we started recording, that's the first time ever that Kamara didn't have a reception in his career. So that definitely hurt Kamara fantasy owners. So hopefully that doesn't continue. But I will move on to my next receiver. That was Jacoby Myers versus the Texans. The last few weeks, we've really seen Myers take off as it looks like Newton's number one receiver. But yesterday, it didn't look too well. He had 3 receptions for 38 yards. Nothing too much more than that. Scored 6.8 points. So that was not a good guess for me. Hopefully, he'll pick it up next week. But it was definitely a shocker yesterday.
Yeah, we had someone tweet at us on our Twitter page. That is at FF in the six. There, if you want to give us a follow on Twitter. So the guy actually tweeted at us. He wanted to ask about who he should start between Jacoby Myers, Chris Godwin, and I think he had DJ Chark as well. And I kind of answered him, and I didn't follow suit with what you said with starting Jacoby Myers. I ended up telling him to start Chris Godwin just because if you have that option between
Oh,
Godwin and Myers, I thought
yeah.
Godwin was pretty much better than Jacoby Myers. With Cam compared to Tom, it's kind of like which quarterback will throw the ball more. And with what I said, with benching Mike Evans against the Rams, going against Jalen Ramsey, I was like, Chris Godwin will definitely get more opportunities. So I told him to go with that. So hopefully things work out for that guy. But yeah, Jacoby Myers was I think a lot of people were riding for it to start in their lineup, and it just didn't work out for them.
Yeah, 100%. Who did you have for your receivers to sit?
Well, like I was saying earlier, Mike Evans against the Rams. We'll see how that plays out with them. And the other guy I had for my bench was Jerry Judy versus the Miami Dolphins. Jerry Judy, he had 3 receptions for 37 yards. He was targeted 8 times during the game, but he only scored 6.7 fantasy points. A lot of opportunities. 8 targets coming towards Jerry Judy. Like we were saying, that game was uh, pretty much bad outing for Tua, but not really that great for Jerry Judy. Someone that you want to see doing pretty well. I think KJ Hamler was pretty good for them offensively. Uh, Not sure how he did statistically, but we'll take a look at that. He didn't do that much better actually than Jerry Judy. He only scored 7.5 points. He was targeted 6 times, 4 receptions for 35 yards. It's kind of a tough game just for Drew Lock to sling the ball out to his receivers. But yeah, who'd you have for your running backs to start?
Running backs to start. We'll start with the one that actually played, Ezekiel Elliott. I was finally glad to see him do as well as he should be. The Vikings defense isn't great against the rush, so I'm glad to see he finally got that game that we've expected him to have over the past couple of weeks. 21 carries, 103 yards. He did have one receiving touchdown, so that was great to see. It was actually his first game over 100 yards this season, so that's kind of surprising, but what are you going to do without Dak Prescott right in front of you? So it's definitely tough for that Cowboys offense right now. But it was nice to see him score or just over 19 points there.
Yeah, that was a big start right there to get Ezekiel Elliott going. I was pretty surprised. I was watching that game and seeing Zeke getting those touches. I think they were saying during the game that one of the like analysts talked to Mike McCarthy, and Mike McCarthy was saying that they want to get Zeke the ball 30 times this game. And they we're getting pretty close to that. 21 carries for the 103 yards and his first 100-yard game this season. Pretty big game for Zeke. Hopefully, moving forward, that offense continues to thrive, but not too much because I want my Giants to make the playoffs now.
Hey, you never know. The Giants are looking decent with those 3 wins or whatever they have, and, hey, they might get first place. You never know.
Oh yeah, let's hope for that. Who's your second guy there that you had?
Second guy there was DeAndre Swift. It came out later in the week, I think Wednesday or Thursday after we recorded that one episode, but he did have a concussion, so he did not end up playing against the Panthers. Even if I said to start Adrian Peterson, he did nothing. He had 18 yards on 7 rushes, scoring 1.8 points. But it's definitely concerning to see Swift out. I hope he gets better, and I hope he's back for week 12.
Yeah, hopefully DeAndre Swift is healthy and able to come back for week 12. You just definitely see the Detroit Lions offense struggling without him there. I think they didn't end up scoring at all last
No,
week.
0 points, yeah.
Yeah, so kind of struggling offensively without Swift there. So hopefully he's able to come back and that offense is able to move the ball forward. For my guys that I said to sit, Duke Johnson versus the New England Patriots. He only had 10 rushes for 15 yards and 3 receptions for 20 yards. Scored a total of 6.5 points. That game was more of Deshaun Watson's game as he was able to, dish the ball out to his receivers and get them going and moving the chains and everything. But on the ground, not much of an impact there from him. Duke Johnson. I'm not sure if you happen to catch that game at all there, Johnny.
No, Anthony, I didn't watch too much of the Patriots game there and the Texans, but that was a good guess that you had for Duke Johnson to sit. Obviously, he's not like David Johnson, even though David Johnson isn't amazing. But that Texans offense definitely is struggling this season, as we've seen. Like you said, 15 yards. That's not looking too good. Definitely a good sit option there, only scoring 6 points. So I'm glad to see you did well with that guess.
Thank you. The next one I'm very proud of to say, Todd Gurley versus the New Orleans Saints. He had 8 carries for 26 yards, 1 reception for 3 yards. He scored a total of 3.9 fantasy points. Not a good outing at all for Todd Gurley against the number one run defense, the New Orleans Saints. And, just a little surprising just because of, with Taysom Hill coming into the game and starting for the Saints. You think a quarterback that was getting his first career start at the age of 30 would struggle a bit offensively and not be able to, make a huge impact on the field. But he was able to put up points for his guys, put pressure on the offense for Atlanta, and make them one dimensional in passing the ball. Matt Ryan struggled a lot during that game. It was a good thing I had him on my bench, but just a big surprise there from Atlanta being such a good offensive team over the years, and they were trying to pick up the pace, and then getting roadblocked by the Saints. I was pretty happy with that set of Todd Gurley.
Yeah, like you said, it was definitely surprising how well Taysom Hill actually did. But talking on the Falcons side, we always know that the Falcons are a throw first team. It's not like the Browns where they're a run first. So it's always definitely a risky start to start Gurley, but definitely against those Saints with the number one rushing defense, it's going to be tough. And when they do have that type of defense, Matt Ryan's going to look to throw the ball like he did most of this game. Calvin really did really well. Julio did well up until he went down with that lingering hamstring issue. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that for this week. But yeah, Todd Gurley did not do very well. The Saints kept him very contained, and it was definitely a good sit option.
Yeah, who are your starting options for tight end?
Tight ends, we're gonna go back to that game. I'm gonna say Jared Cook, and man, oh man, that was not good. I think Taysom Hill gave him 2 targets. I want to say maximum, maybe 3, but he only had that 1 reception, and that 1 reception got him 6 yards. And that was it. He did nothing else. He was that one catch was pretty close to the end zone, so that would have been nice to get in there, but he didn't. He put up 1.6 points, and that was my probably my biggest bust of the week.
Yeah, that was a very tough outing for Jared Cook there, and just getting the 1 reception for 6 yards. Not much action there. How about your next guy that you had?
Next guy was okay. That was TJ Hawkinson. Although the Lions didn't put up any points, TJ did get 4 receptions for 68 yards on 7 targets, so that was nice. Ultimately scoring 10.8 points. So not great, but not as bad as Jared Cook.
Well, that's not bad. That's pretty decent there for TJ Hawkinson. For a team that scored 0 points and putting up 10, that's pretty solid numbers.
Exactly.
So my tight ends that I had to sit, one of them, Mike Gesicki against Denver Broncos. With Tua coming out of the game, um, it was kind of looking good for my prediction there with Mike Gesicki to have been on your bench for that game. Until Fitzmagic had came into the game, he started throwing the ball out to him, and Mike Gesicki ended up with 4 receptions for 43 yards, targeted 5 times in the game, and he scored 8.3 fantasy points. Pretty decent game for Mike Gesicki. But I was pretty happy up until Ryan Fitzmagic came in and started throwing the ball to him. The next guy, Dalton Schultz, 4 receptions for 25 yards. He had 1 touchdown. That touchdown came, I think, late into the game, and it was just like I was watching the game and trying to think, what wide receiver is going to make the play here? Is it going to be Amari Cooper? Is it going to be, C.D. Lamb making a play, or Michael Gallup? Nope, Dalton Schultz catching the TD, just give me the big fuck you to my face to saying to bench him. So I was kind of like, oh, you know what? If he didn't have that, that would have been like a good minus 7 points, if you're playing PPR league. And that would have been a pretty good sit for me.
Yeah, he's definitely fallen off ever since Dak left with that injury. He hasn't looked great at all, so he's not obviously a good reliable option. So I'd say the same thing to sit him, but of course he had to get that 1 touchdown and rub it in your face.
Yeah, I definitely felt that one from Dalton Schultz.
I 100% agree with you. Last but not least, on my starts for defense, LA Chargers D against the Jets. Surprisingly, not the best defense this week. It was actually went to the Cleveland Browns, but Chargers did okay. They did allow 26 points. I was honestly surprised by that. I thought the Jets were going to come back, but they did end up getting actually a pick six. So that was nice. 1 sack only, which was kind of strange, but they didn't end up scoring just over 10 points. So that was a good start in my books.
Yeah, I was pretty happy to have them in my lineup and start them for, the solid 10 points. It will help me win my matchup this week. And the team that I had on defense to bench was the Denver Broncos versus the Miami Dolphins. And they scored 12.3 fantasy points. They allowed only 13 points. They had 6 sacks and 1 interception. All on Tua Tagovailoa, the 6 sacks and the pick. Very good defensive effort by the Denver Broncos against the Dolphins. And you know what? That was a mistake on my end to sit them for this week 11 matchups.
Hey, that's okay. Miami, they're I don't know. I didn't expect them to do much this week, but yeah, I don't know. They Tua didn't look great, but they managed to still get 12 points against them. So I don't know. It's definitely a wild guess, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, it's definitely that rookie wall that Tua has hit, just playing against a defense like that, and the players that they have on that defense. It's pretty good personnel. And Vic Fangio, the head coach, defensive minded coach as well. So just a tough outing for the rookie. Hopefully, he's able to bounce back next week. And going into the injuries that had happened in Week 11 and the Week 12 news, the biggest one on the board, in my opinion, rookie quarterback sensation Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. He has a torn ACL and MCL. He is done for the year, and his injury, with the knee injury, is similar to Carson Wentz's knee injury back in 2017. When Carson Wentz was, putting up the MVP numbers, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. Joe Burrow has a similar knee injury to that significance of Carson Wentz. Hopefully Joe Burrow is able to bounce back next year and we're able to see him play right away once he comes back and not miss a few weeks going into the next year. This is a tough outing for the Cincinnati Bengals and what they'll do offensively and who's the next quarterback to step up in that role. Just hopefully looking forward for Joe Burrow to have a speedy recovery and wish him all the best.
Yeah, that was definitely not nice to see. Obviously, like you said, we hope Joe makes a full recovery and he starts on time next season. But obviously, health comes first, and we hope he gets the rehab that he needs and comes back stronger than ever.
Yeah, for sure. A devastating injury
Next,
like that is definitely not good at all. But the next injury, if you wanted to go over it,
yeah, so Thursday night, Kyler Murray, he kind of looked a little bit shaken up there in the fourth quarter. We weren't sure if it was a shoulder or whatever, but it did come out after the game. It was a little bit of a shoulder injury. It's not too certain how long or if he's going to miss any time at all, but definitely keep an eye on that. Next up, running back Rex Burkhead on those New England Patriots did have a pretty serious knee injury in the Week 11 matchup, so we're waiting on his diagnosis right now, but he'll most likely miss some time. Who's the next running back that you have, Anthony?
yeah, came out today the news about Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins, both of those Baltimore Ravens running backs, both tested positive for COVID-19. Not looking good as they are scheduled to play the Pittsburgh Steelers this Thursday on Thanksgiving in America. It's just a big surprise here to see those two guys under testing positive for COVID-19. Hopefully, they're able to get healthy and that they're able to bounce back. So look for Gus Edwards to be the running back there to start against the Pittsburgh Steelers if you're kind of looking for a running back. And the other running back injury, Lamichael Pirine of the New York Jets, high ankle sprain. He is likely to miss several weeks. So Frank Gore, if you're looking for a running back, definitely look into the Frank Gore stock market. I think Frank Gore had like 15 carries or something last game against the Chargers. So look into those, and hopefully they're able to help you out from the waiver wire.
Yeah, Perrin, he's not looking. That's not looking too good. He's definitely that number one back, obviously now in New York. So it's definitely sad to see him out for a couple weeks, but hopefully he comes back next season. Hopefully on a different team, but you never know. Next up, wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster ended up having a toe injury in that game. Again, not out that he's out for any time. So we'll have to see if he practices this week or not. But right now, there's no time as to when or how much of time he'll miss. Next, running back Christian McCaffrey. He's most likely out for week 12 with that shoulder injury. Just terrible to see, obviously, with McCaffrey this season. He's only played a handful of games. So, obviously, those number one picks that you've made for McCaffrey, those aren't working out too well for you. And it's, again, it's definitely hateful to see that he's not back. So, hopefully, he gets back soon.
Yeah, whoever drafted Mike Davis or picked him up hit the fucking lottery
What a pick that
with uh
was.
with getting him. I was like, holy, McCaffrey is, like you said, only played a handful of games. It's very disappointing to see. Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings tested positive for COVID-19 as well. Definitely a big shocker as he was playing unbelievable against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday. And it's just unfortunate to see those news come out. Hopefully, he is able to get healthy and come back. Moving forward, the game is definitely going to be going towards Dalvin Cook more offensively. And hopefully, this allows Justin Jefferson to get more targets, more opportunities with the ball in his hands. I have him in my fantasy league and I love him and having him on my roster, but hopefully it's just able to make him more dominant in the red zone and everything.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see if Jefferson does get more targets with Thielen out, most likely this week, obviously, and possibly next week. But yeah, let's move on to our Week 12 starters. I'll let you start off, Anthony.
Yeah, so for right now, for the fans listening, and usually we would go over our starters and then we go over the bench. But this week we're going to switch it up and we're just going to go through our list of the starters and then we'll go into the bench. So starting off with QB1 for your starters, you want to go with Justin Herbert against the Buffalo Bills. Last week, Herbert was 37-49. He had 366 passing yards, three TDs, two rushes for 11 yards. He was sacked 3 times. He scored a total of 29.8 fantasy points. The Bills defense has only allowed 15 passing TDs this year, which is ranked ninth overall in the league. However, with Justin Herbert just playing absolutely outstanding, even for a rookie, he's highly considered for the Rookie of the Year award. He's thrown for 2,699 passing yards. He has 22 TDs and 6 interceptions on the season. Even though Herbert hasn't really played a lot on the East Coast, and depending on the weather situation in Buffalo on Sunday, which I kind of took a look at for today, it says right now it'll be sunny, but the weather could always change if it's a snowstorm or whatever. Cannot see Herbert really slinging the ball out there, so just keep an eye out for the weather forecast. Um, but other than that, if the weather is a clear go and the winds are good, Herbert is still a surefire starter in my opinion, and this game will definitely be a good one between him and Josh Allen.
Yeah, he's been looking unreal this season. So, like you said, I wouldn't doubt it that he will get that Rookie of the Year award. But moving on to our second QB start, we're going to say Kirk Cousins against the Panthers. I know Kirk Cousins has been extremely doubtful this season. He's looked really good in some games, really bad in some others. Last week against the Cowboys, though, did pretty well 22 for 30, 314 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 1 rush for 4 yards, sacked 2 times. He did fumble, but it ended up scoring 27.8 fantasy points. So that was one of his best games of the season. This week, going up against the Panthers, they do allow around 245 passing yards per game, which makes them 16th. So right in the middle of the pack. 1.5 passing touchdowns per game. So again, right in the middle there of the league. Again, Cousins did really well 2 weeks ago, actually, against the Bears, putting up 292 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. So that's great to see, especially against a tough Bears defense. So going up against Panthers, that's definitely going to be a little easier for the Vikings. Carolina's average opposing passer rating is actually 95.5, so making them the 14th worst. So again, right in the middle of the pack. But with Thielen out, Jefferson will definitely see a lot more looks from Cousins, but it's all up to Cousins to see how he does. But we're thinking against those Panthers, he's going to do well.
Yeah, and with the Panthers possibly having PJ Walker as their starter again for this upcoming week, it just puts the offense for the Vikings in more opportunities to score. Even with Thielen out, like you were saying, Jefferson will definitely see a lot more looks, but there's also like Irv Smith Jr., the tight end on the roster. He's a pretty good option for Kirk Cousins. He's been good in the red zone in a few games the past few weeks. And then even with Dalvin Cook in the screen game, like once Dalvin Cook catches the ball in his hands and he has those linemen running out in front of him, he's going to make people miss and just be able to score and run at free will. So, yeah, like you were saying, Kirk Cousins definitely a good option versus the Carolina Panthers. For the running back, number one that I said to start for this upcoming week, he did come out of nowhere, I guess, from last week being in a running back committee. Jonathan Taylor versus the Tennessee Titans. Last week against the Green Bay Packers, I know the Packers are a very weak run defense team. Jonathan Taylor had 22 carries for 90 yards. He had 4 receptions for 24 yards, and he scored a total of 15.4 fantasy points. Now, this was a game where Naheem Hines was expected to get more carries, and it turned out that Jonathan Taylor was just going to get more action than Hines. So Taylor had played 56% of the snaps. Hines played 33, and Jordan Wilkins has played 11%. So ever since week 8, Taylor's snap count has been diminishing. But going against the Titans in week 12 and seeing how J.K. Dobbins put up 18.5 fantasy points, it's definitely a matchup to take advantage of. And hopefully the Colts just ride the hot hand with Taylor moving forward. Rookie running back, and you draft him in the second round. Definitely going to want to use and abuse those fresh legs and everything, and just make him, the bell cow of the offense. The Titans' run defense is also ranked 19th, and they're in the middle of the pack and allowing TDs to running backs as well. So definitely give Jonathan Taylor the starting nod for your running back position.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird running game there in Indianapolis. One week we thought Naheem Hines was going to be their number one starter. Last week, Jonathan Taylor took over. But like you said, they didn't spend that second round draft pick for nothing. I hope they use Taylor for the rest of the year as their number one. But we'll have to wait and see. But he did have that great week last week. And like you said, with Dobbins up against the Titans, he had a really great week. So I'd like to see Taylor do the same that Dobbins did. Moving on to my running back starter, Miles Sanders versus the Seattle Seahawks. Last week versus Cleveland, didn't do so hot. 16 rushes for 66 yards. He had a couple of receptions for 15 yards as well, scoring 9.6 points. But going up against those Hawks, they do have one of the worst passing defenses in the league. But I am aware Miles is a running back. But hear me out. So let's have a scenario here. So Carson Wentz is going to toss a couple balls deep, and they're going to get into the red zone. And I believe they're going to use Miles in that red zone, especially on the goal line. I'd like to see Sanders get possibly one, even two touchdowns. But you never know. Seattle does average around 343 passing yards per game. That's 43 more yards than the second worst team of the Falcons. So that's pretty wild, especially considering how well the Seahawks are doing this season. But like I said, I think they're going to use Miles Sanders a lot in that red zone area. And I'd like to think that he's going to put up some more points than he did last week, especially hopefully he gets those touchdowns against the Hawks.
Yeah, that's definitely a outside way of thinking things, there with Miles Sanders against the Seattle Seahawks and being a receiving option on that end. And in PPR leagues, that's huge. Once they make that reception, 1 point awarded to them, right? So
Yeah, exactly. It definitely helps when you're in that PPR league and you have that versatile running back to help you out with points. But again, let's hope he does well. And let's move on to receivers. So, who do you have for your number one?
yeah, so number one, I was saying my guy, Darius Slayton, at Cincinnati Bengals. He was on bye week last week. So looking at his week 10 numbers versus the Philadelphia Eagles, he had 5 receptions for 93 yards. He scored a total of 14.3 fantasy points. Now, I know he hasn't been putting up outstanding numbers this year, but, he has been asserting himself as the number one wide receiver with the Giants. But this might be his game to just assert his dominance overall and making an impact for that team, just to get his name out there. So going against the Bengals, they did lose Joe Burrow for the remainder of the year, so this will give Daniel Jones the green light to just sling it everywhere against this defense. Offensively for the Bengals, I don't see them pushing the ball down the field and making a huge impact. So this will allow Daniel Jones to get on the field more, showcase his talents and using all of their weapons offensively. So the Bengals are ranked 11th against the pass. They've allowed 22 passing TDs, which is the fourth most in the league. And right now, Darius Slayton has the second most targets on the team with 64, and he's tied with the most receptions of 38, and he has the most receiving yards on the team with 584, with currently 3 TDs. So with those numbers in mind and looking at, the Giants offensively overall and who they have in their personnel, I'm thinking Darius Slayton is a number one receiver you want to give a start to against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, it's definitely a great start. Like you said, the Bengals are definitely beaten up right now, and the Giants know that. They're pretty close to a playoff spot, like we were saying. So they need these wins, especially against the Bengals, who aren't a great team. Daniel Jones is going to know that. So he's going to use his receivers. He's going to use his rushing abilities to get those points. But I like Slayton in this matchup, and as well as Sterling Shepard. But Slayton, I think, is going to put up a good game.
Yeah, I'm hopeful for that too. Who do you have for your starting wide receiver?
On the other side of the field, I have Tyler Boyd. So obviously, we know he's looking like the Bengals' number one receiver, last week against Washington. He did lead the team with 11 targets, had 9 receptions out of those 11 for 85 yards. No touchdowns, but with those 85 yards, he did end up scoring 17 and a half fantasy points. So that was very good to see if you were a Boyd owner. Boyd does have 87 targets on the year with 69 receptions. Very nice with 710 receiving yards. So now that Joe Burrow is done for the year, Ryan Finley will most likely step up to be that starting quarterback for the rest of the year. And you can probably guarantee that he's going to be looking for Boyd. We kind of saw that with Taysom Hill and Michael Thomas. He was looking for Thomas probably every other play. So I think Finley's definitely going to use Boyd whenever he can. The Giants do allow around 257 passing yards per game while averaging 1.5 passing TDs per game. So we'd like to think that Boyd might find the end zone this game. But again, I think these Giants are going to play really hard, knowing that they are in playoff contention. But again, I think Tyler Boyd is just he's definitely stepping up this year, and it's great to see that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a Tyler Boyd owner myself, so I'm pretty happy with him. Consistently in and out every week, just putting up big numbers. Statistically, it's unfortunate, like we were saying, to see Joe Burrow is done for the year. But with Ryan Finley, maybe he'll be looking to Boyd still and just being confident in himself and trusting that relationship that they have, just to get him the ball more and. Hopefully it's a good impact for Boyd to, get some opportunities against the Giants and just put himself in the end zone there for some big points for fantasy owners. Moving on to the next position, tight ends. I was saying to start Eric Ebron versus the Baltimore Ravens last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Eric Ebron had 4 receptions for 36 yards and 1 TD. He scored a total of 13.6 fantasy points. Over the last 4 weeks, Ebron has averaged 11.35 fantasy points, which isn't overly outstanding. But against the Ravens for the second time this season, he should be a good start for the tight ends as he was able to put up 14.8 fantasy points the last time they went up against each other, which was the second most points he's scored this year. And Ebron has also scored a touchdown in 3 of the last 4 weeks. So I kind of look for him to find the end zone again against the Baltimore Ravens. And, just with some of the receivers that, we were saying earlier with Pittsburgh, Juju Smith Schuster with the toe injury, if he's able to miss time, or if he's missing any time, actually, just maybe more opportunity for Eric Ebron. But even so, Big Ben does like throwing to his big targets in the red zone area. So Eric Ebron will definitely make an impact against the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, Anthony, I was debating on either starting Ebron or riding Jared Cook again, but looking like Ebron, he's been doing really well, and I didn't realize that he did so well against those Ravens last game. So I definitely think I'm gonna have to start him this week over Cook, just based on how he's been performing these past couple of weeks. So thank you for that. Let's move on to my tight end. This is most likely a no-brainer for you, but Darren Waller, I'd say he's probably the number 2 tight end behind Travis Kelce this season. He's just stepped it up big time, coming off of that really good season last season. He's really looked great this season, so that's really good to see. Last week against the Chiefs, had a really good game, 7 targets, caught all of them for 88 yards, plus a touchdown, ended up with 21.8 points. So that was a very good to see. Falcons, again, they have terrible defense. So going up against them, you'd want to play any Raider receiver that you have. So Henry Ruggs might not be a bad option. You never know. But Darren Waller being one of those tight ends that you have to hit is definitely a good start against those Falcons D.
Yeah, I love having Darren Waller on my fantasy team. He's absolutely outstanding. Um, Especially in a year with the tight end position kind of struggling. Some of the guys are just late emergence coming out this year, but Darren Waller very consistent in and out every year. So I'm kind of glad I traded for him.
For sure. He's done nothing but impressed me so far in one of my leagues. So I'm very excited that I have him.
Yeah, and moving on to the defense that I was saying to start this week. Definitely want to start the Green Bay Packers defense versus the Chicago Bears. Earlier today, Adam Schefter tweeted about the Bears quarterback situation, and head coach Matt Nagy was kind of debating between who to start between Trubisky or Nick Foles. Right now, Chicago's quarterback Mitchell Trubisky has a shoulder injury, and Nick Foles with his hip are still dealing with those injuries. And Matt Nagy declined to name a starter for Sunday's game against Green Bay, saying a QB change is still on the table. So not looking good for Nick Foles, as he was the recent starter for the Bears, and they're starting to uh, show their true colors offensively. Maybe the team goes back to Mitchell Trubisky. Maybe they look for another option that's available via free agency or the waivers or practice squad. So I would say it's kind of easy to start the Green Bay defense against the Chicago Bears. The Bears offense are ranked 31st in yards per game with 300.9 yards, and they only put up 19.1 points per game. So definitely give this Green Bay Packers defense the starting spot there for your defense. And I'm sure they will definitely demolish the Bears on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, I actually ended up picking the Packers up before all the games yesterday, so that I wouldn't have to put in a claim for them because I saw they were going up against the Bears, and I realized, Bears aren't anything really on offense this year with Trubisky in there and Foles not doing great. So until they make a change there, I'm definitely going to stick with the Green Bay Packers next week.
Yeah, definitely a good pickup there that you made.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll move on to our last start, which is Matthew Prater, kicker for the Detroit Lions versus the Houston Texans next week. Yesterday, he did not do so hot. I think he put up a big goose egg with 0 points. Really, the whole Detroit Lions offense did not do much. So you can't blame Prater for not even getting a PAT because they didn't even get a touchdown. But the Texans do allow just under 2 field goal attempts per game. Prater has really proved himself as a kicker, hitting that huge, I think it was 59 yarder a couple of weeks ago to win the game. So I think he's definitely ready to put up some more points. And if Stafford can put up more touchdowns this week and get them into Texans territory, I think Prater's gonna have himself a week.
So week 12 bench number one quarterback to bench this week. Lamar Jackson versus Pittsburgh Steelers. Last week Lamar was 17 to 29, 186 yards, one TD. He was intercepted once. He was sacked once. He had 13 rushes for 51 yards. Scored a total of 16.3 fantasy points. Lamar Jackson, week 8 versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. His numbers were 13 for 28. He had 208 yards, two TDs, two interceptions, which one of them was a pick six. He was sacked 4 times. He had 16 rushes for 65 yards. He had 3 fumbles and lost 2 of them. He scored a total of 11.9 fantasy points. So on a short week going against the Pittsburgh Steelers with your two running backs testing positive for COVID-19, doesn't look like a key matchup for Lamar to start against the Pittsburgh Steelers in fantasy. I'm sure Lamar will get some easy yards here and there by running the ball, but passing the ball, the Ravens are not, the number one option for that category in passing yards and passing attempts. So the Ravens average 160 yards rushing per game, but I just can't see a domination from Lamar Jackson going against this Pittsburgh Steelers defense, as we've seen time and time again, even earlier this year. Lamar has struggled immensely against this defense, so definitely bench him this week.
Yeah, he's been so inconsistent this year that I think, especially going up that Steelers team, and they just played week 8, I believe. So we know what Lamar is kind of already doing, and without those two running backs in the lineup, the Steelers I don't think are going to have a problem really guessing what they're going to do. It's either is Lamar running the ball, is he going to hand it off to Gus, or is he going to throw it to Mark Andrews? That's really all they have. So I don't think Lamar's going to get too much done.
Yeah, I just can't see it at all either. Who do you have for QB2 to bench this week?
QB2 to bench this week, I'm going to have to say Cam Newton versus the Arizona Cardinals. Last week, Cam did go 26 for 40 for 365 passing yards. So I think that is one of his better games of the season. He did have a passing touchdown in there. He had a couple of rushes for 6 yards, scoring 17.7 points. He has been playing well for the past couple of weeks since week 7, I'd say. Not putting up great numbers, but putting up decent numbers. The Cardinals are a little on the worst side when it comes to passing defense. They're ranked 18th, giving up 19 passing touchdowns. So that's obviously 10th most in the league, I believe. But when it comes to rushing touchdowns, they are very good at the goal line, let's say. They've only given up 6 rushing. And we both know that Cam loves to do that. He loves to sneak right up the middle. He loves to go right or left. But I think it's definitely going to be a tougher matchup for Cam, considering he doesn't have many players to throw the ball to. And when he wants to rush, I think Arizona's going to be able to shut him down. He has thrown 2 TDs and 4 interceptions against the Cardinals, and only scoring one rushing TD throughout his whole career. So, especially losing Rex Burkhead to that knee injury, I don't think Cam's going to have himself a great week.
Yeah, it's just tough to see the outlook offensively for Cam against this Arizona Cardinals defense. Rex Burkhead, was leading the team in receiving TDs this year with only 3. And like you were saying earlier, with the Cardinals only allowing 6 rushing TDs this year, it's definitely that's Cam's strength is fighting for yards to get into the end zone. If they're ranked, third in that category, it's going to be tough to just see him make an impact against this Cardinals defense.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Who is your number one RB sit for this week?
Yeah, so running back number 1 to sit. This is a big decision for me personally, just because I have him on my fantasy team. Clyde Edwards-Helaire at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Last week against the Las Vegas Raiders, he had 14 rushes for 69 yards, 2 TDs, 1 receptions for 8 yards. He scored a total of 20.7 fantasy points. So this was a very good game for Clyde Edwards-Helaire owners. Like I said earlier, for myself included in that. But going against the Bucks defense, who have allowed 766 rush yards, they're ranked second against the run overall. Uh, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is definitely not someone I would want to play. Even in the passing game, Helaire doesn't make a huge impact. Over the last 3 games, Helaire has been targeted 10 times. He's caught 7 of those passes for only 38 yards. Le'Veon Bell, Darrell Williams, we both know, those are the running backs there as well in Kansas City, and they obviously take touches away from Helaire, but Williams is more of the receiving back compared to Helaire. And where I see this game going is just more of a shootout between Mahomes and Brady and using those receiving threats down the field and everything. And I just don't see Helaire being an option. Usually when I watch the game, I could see Pat Mahomes just looking down the field and he'll throw a bomb of a pass to Kelsey or Tyreek. He doesn't really check it down that much to someone like Helaire, and I've seen Helaire kind of make some drops here and there, and it's just very disappointing to see because those are just easy passes that you'd want your running back one that you drafted to just make those easy catches and things like that. But just haven't seen that from Helaire, so it's definitely a sit for me against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see with those checkdowns, like you were saying. They might switch it up for the game against the Bucks. You never know, but again, like you were saying, they haven't really been doing that with CEH for the season so far. And going up against a tough Bucks defense with that rushing defense that they're known for, I don't think he's going to have a great week. He was very lucky to get those 2 touchdowns yesterday against the Raiders, but yeah, with only 69 yards, not great. And with that 1 reception, it's not looking too good for next week against the Bucks. All right, moving on to my running back sit of the week. We're going to say Jerick McKinnon against those LA Rams. So last week, actually 2 weeks ago, they're coming off of a bye week this week, but 2 weeks ago against the Saints, he had a terrible game, scored 5.6 fantasy points, 18 rushing yards, 18 rushing plays, sorry, for only 33 yards. So that is not good at all. The 49ers did end up playing the Rams earlier this season, and I think Raheem Mostert was in the lineup for this game, so it's not entirely accurate. But McKinnon did only score 4.8 points against them. But we know Rams defense is very similar to Saints. They're very strong up front, especially with AD in the lineup. If he's ready to go, it's definitely going to be tough for McKinnon to get a hole to go up the middle, to go up the left, go up the right, whatever. But yeah, the Rams are only averaging 96.8 rushing yards per game, which is fifth best in the league, and less than one rushing touchdown per game. So it's going to be very tough for McKinnon to gather any points. And so I think it's definitely just safer to keep him on the bench.
Yeah, good idea to keep him on the bench for that matchup against the Rams. Moving on to the wide receiver one, I was saying to bench this week is Mike Williams at the Buffalo Bills. I know we were saying to start Justin Herbert. And last week against the New York Jets, Mike Williams had 4 receptions for 72 yards. He had one TD, scored a total of 17.2 fantasy points. Um, put up a good game against the Jets, but it is the New York Jets overall, so we kind of knew that was coming. So over the last 3 games, Mike Williams has only been targeted 19 times. He's made 11 receptions out of those 19 targets for 191 yards and one TD, which is still pretty good. But I'm just expecting this game for the ball to just go more towards Keenan Allen. Mike Williams has the third most targets on the team with 52, behind Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry. He has made 29 receptions this year, and Joshua Kelly is slowly creeping up behind him with 21 catches. So it looks like Justin Herbert's distributing the ball to his other guys and not so much Mike Williams. Can kind of see this game, as I was saying earlier, just being more of a Keenan Allen game plan. And, maybe if, with Austin Eckler maybe coming back, if he's in the lineup, it's just more tailored towards him and them running the ball than just seeing Mike Williams doing his thing and kind of dominating like he did against the Jets.
Yeah, like you're saying with Eckler possibly coming back, I know Herbert loved to use them with those checkdowns, whatever. But I think if he does come back, that's definitely going to hurt Mike Williams' projections. And I think if he does come back, I think it's definitely a safer sit for Mike Williams rather than start him. He did go up against the Jets, like you were saying. So obviously he's going to have a decent game, but going up against the Bills, that's a complete different story. And yeah, I guess we'll wait and see during this week if Eckler makes a practice and if he's going to come back or not. All right, moving on to my wide receiver sit for this week. We're going to say Jarvis Landry against the Jacksonville Jaguars last week against the Eagles. Only 2 receptions for 23 yards, scoring 4.6 points. And it's weird to see because when OBJ did go down with that season-ending injury, a lot of us thought that Jarvis was going to be that number one receiver there in Cleveland, and he might still be. But now that with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt are healthy, obviously that Browns strategy is just to run the ball. And why would you need to use Jarvis Landry? So I think it's definitely safer to keep him on the bench. He's very inconsistent. His best game of the season so far was when he threw that passing touchdown to Beckham Jr., which is really, really funny. But again, he's so inconsistent with that Browns offense. So I think it's definitely just safer to keep him on the bench.
Yeah, with Baker just playing, you know, as we were saying last week, kind of like under that Minnesota Vikings style offense with Chubb and Hunt and them running the ball. Jarvis Landry just not going to get the ball and opportunities like we were hoping for. So it's just a disappointment to see for that fantasy value overall to diminish like that.
Yeah, it's definitely hurtful to see, but what can you do when you have one of the two very good running backs at your disposal? So you may as well use them if you have them.
Yeah, those guys are complete animals there in that backfield. Moving on to the tight end, I was saying to bench upcoming for week 12. Jimmy Graham at the Green Bay Packers. Last week he was on bye. So last game, week 10 versus Minnesota Vikings, he had 2 targets, no receptions, no rushing attempts, no nothing, scored 0 points. And it's just a tough situation when your head coach is saying that they're not sure about who to start for their quarterback. Graham's production has been pretty steady this year, but with the uncertainty of the quarterback position, I just wouldn't trust playing him against the Packers. Even though it's against his former team, revenge games, I'm pretty big on that. And, a player just, doing the best they can against their former team and just exploiting them and mismatches and things like that. It's just not a good game for Jimmy Graham against the Green Bay Packers without a quarterback, that they have announced as their starter.
Yeah, again, it's definitely tough to say because of that offense situation in Chicago when you don't even know who your starting QB is going to be at the beginning of the week. It's definitely tough, but like you said, he's going up against his old Packer team. Obviously, you want to see him do well, but again, I don't think it's too certain what any of that offense is going to do this week. So it's definitely better to keep him on the bench. My tight end to sit this week is going to be very familiar for you. Evan Ingram, he is going up against those Bengals, like we mentioned earlier, with Sterling Shepard and then Darius Slayton. But last week against the Eagles, only 2 receptions for 15 yards, putting up 3.5 points. Ingram's been a serious letdown this season. I think we all have seen that really with Barkley going down early. I thought Ingram was going to have an increase in workload, but that's not the case. He's had 67 targets, which is okay, but only 38 receptions and 1 touchdown, which I didn't even know until we were kind of looking up stats for this episode. But that's not what you like to see out of your tight end, especially if he's your number one. Um, Daniel Jones, obviously, he likes to go to his receivers when they're healthy. Tate, if he's in the lineup. But Ingram has been so inconsistent this season. And although the Bengals don't have great defense, the Giants are struggling on offense this season. So he's a very risky start if you need him. But he's definitely better off on the bench.
Yeah, 100% agree with you there. Just to sit him for this week against the Cincinnati Bengals. Like we were saying, it probably might just be more game plan for Darius Slayton and him getting those opportunities. Maybe Evan Ingram can move the sticks a bit here and there, but just the end zone production just hasn't been there, surprisingly, from him. So, just definitely not his year. Moving on to the kicker to sit this week, Ryan Suckup, kicker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Last week against the Carolina Panthers, he scored 16 points. He's been overall outstanding this year in fantasy for Tom Brady leading their offense. But this game just might be a shootout and leading into PATs for the kickers, and with the amount of TDs that will be scored for this upcoming game. That's just my prediction overall. I'm not sure if that will actually happen, but just to give a little input from last week's game for the Raiders versus Chiefs, Daniel Carlson, the kicker for the Raiders, he only scored 7 points against the Chiefs, kicking one field goal that was between 30 to 39 yards out. The rest of his points came from PATs, so that just tells you, like, for the Chiefs defense, they're kind of easy to score on a bit. I'm sure Brady could dice them up here and there and, make plays for touchdowns and things like that when they get in the red zone. Just not a lot of opportunity for Suck Up to kick field goals, so that's why he's on my bench this week.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Bringing up Daniel Carlson last week, it's definitely you're probably your most helpful point to see how other kickers did in previous weeks. And with Carlson only hitting 1 field goal, I think it's definitely safer to keep Suck up on the bench and then possibly pick up one on the waiver wire. All right, last but not least, we're gonna hit up our defense that we want to sit. Last week I said to start them. This is going to be the LA Chargers against the Buffalo Bills. So last game against the Jets, like I was saying earlier, really surprisingly, they allowed 26 points. They had 1 sack and then that 1 interception. They ended up scoring 9 points, but I thought they were going to do a lot better considering it's the Jets. The Bills are coming off of a bye week. Josh Allen has looked really, really good over the past couple of weeks, throwing 415 passing yards and 3 touchdowns against the Seahawks, which was 42 fantasy points and then 284 passing yards, 2 touchdowns against the Arizona Cardinals, being 33.3 fantasy points. So, with the Chargers allowing around 228 passing yards per game, plus 2 passing touchdowns per game, it's going to be an extremely difficult matchup for the Chargers. So, I'd definitely say, either stream a new defense or keep them on the bench.
Wow, that's definitely a good idea. I did not realize Josh Allen had been on a big tear there. With going against the Seahawks for 42 points and then the Cardinals for 33. And just didn't know about the Chargers allowing the 2 passing TDs per game. That's kind of big info right there. So that's kind of helpful to definitely stream a defense this week. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the FF in the Six podcast. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter, YouTube, uh, Instagram. We'll be happy to give you some information with fantasy advice with your rosters and setting them up, who to pick up, things like that. Just tweet at us, message us. We're happy to help you guys. Give us a follow. Download our podcast on Spotify as well. Thank you and good luck this week for week 12.